This is Richard Roberts. Oh, everybody says that. That's not better. Now we're going to introduce you to what I feel is the jewel in the Weiss Brothers collection of comedians, Edwin Poodles Hanneford. All right, not the most well-known name in the world. I imagine not one you see listed much along the likes of Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, but a good comic, and you're going to be surprised. This is good. You're going to like this. This is Edwin Argus playing the ringmaster. We saw him in She Said No with Ben Turpin a little earlier. He seems to play the villain in a number of the Weiss Brothers comedies. Here's the leading lady, Betty Walsh, or Welsh, depending on the spelling in whichever picture she's in. She seems to be credited both ways. Not a well-known comedian or leading lady. Again, she seemed to have been employed a lot at the Stern Brothers Universal lot in the late 20s, working in the Sid Saylor, Let George Do It comedies, and the Mike and Ike comedies, which co-starred Joe Young, who we'll be seeing a bit of later. And here's Poodles. Used to be a dog trainer. Well, not really, but it's a nice little, actually cute little introductory gag, a little setup here. Reasonable amount of cleverness. No, can't think of it having been done anywhere else. Now, it is kind of odd to have a comic who specialized in a horse act being known as Poodles, but I guess the family legend, it's pretty much like how Buster Keaton got his name. Poodles was only 3 days old, actually, young Edwin Hanneford, when his Aunt Kate decided that because of his curly hair and his happy demeanor that he looked like a big happy poodle. So apparently the name stuck, and he used it for the rest of his life, even though I've yet to see him performing with any sort of canine. But that's the way those things goes. The Hanneford family is another one of those British, multi-generational show business families. Again, he's much well known to circus historians than certainly film historians. Kind of like the Lupino family, also in Britain. The Lupinos went through many generations. Lupino Lane, Wallace Lupino, Stanley Lupino, Ida Lupino. But the Hannefords, again, like I said, well-known circus performers, many generations of circus clowns that continue to this day. Poodles was an expert horse trainer, and that was his act, was doing some amazing stunts with the horses. His parents worked for the Lord John Sanger Circus in England, and were working for Sanger at the time when Hanneford was born. What was it, June 14th? 1891. He was raised in the circus life, was working and training with horses, again, almost from the time he could walk. He was doing trick riding and learning how to train these large white Lipizzan horses that you're going to see him working with here. I mean, these horses, it's incredible. These horses are very used to being handled, climbed on, fell over. I mean, they're incredibly trained. And again, that takes a lot of patience. But it's amazing to watch him work with them here. In fact, Hanneford is still famous in circus history for creating a gag basically called the step-off, a bareback riding trick where the rider stands on the back of a galloping horse, galloping in the circus ring. And while standing on the horse, just literally steps off, straight-legged, landing on the ground and strolling away as if nothing had happened. And you'll see, listen, Hanneford obviously is another incredible acrobat, incredible physical control. And like most of the great comic acrobats like Lupino Lane and Buster Keaton, short, stocky, that just seemed to be, I think that's almost the type. It's a physical type. That's why you don't see as many tall comedians. When you're all legs and arms, it's sort of harder to keep that kind of control. But like I said, you haven't seen it yet, although if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. But it's fascinating to watch what he does here. This is just the beginning. Now, the Hanneford family came over to America in 1915. Were brought over by John Ringling North to appear in the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And basically, just sort of like the three Keatons in vaudeville, the Hanneford family became headliners very soon, and young Poodles was the star of the act. And again, they worked in circuses in America for nearly a decade and built up a large following, were very well known. And the movies beckoned in the early 20s. Apparently, some of the bios say Poodles Hanneford made his first film around 1922. I have not found any before 1923. The first films that we know Poodles Hanneford appeared in were the Tuxedo comedies, which were produced by Real Comedies, Inc. and distributed by Educational Pictures. This was actually a company formed by Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle post-scandal. This is when he was working as a director. Actually, it had been formed first for Arbuckle to make two real comedies once he had gotten through with his manslaughter trial. But unfortunately, the Hayes Office ban in 1923 forced Arbuckle off the screen, so he became a director. In fact, the first comedy Hanneford appears in, which is a comedy called Front, was a reshooting of a Arbuckle comedy called Handy Andy, which they had shot in early 23 starring Arbuckle. And because of the Hayes Office ban, apparently they just put Hanneford into the part and used a lot of the footage that they shot with Arbuckle in long shots. I'm not sure how that worked, because physically they were completely different types, but apparently this is what happened. Hanneford made 4 of the Tuxedo comedies, which were released late 1923, early 1924 for educational. They didn't set off any great fireworks. They were well reviewed. The only one that's known to survive is a fragment of one called No Loafing. And again, Hanneford does some great physical tricks, but it's a decent comedy. But I think Hanneford was such a big star in the circus. He was making far more money there. And it was just not a wise career move to give it up for motion pictures. So he didn't. But he was still perfectly happy to pick up the extra money during the layoff time for the circuses. So he'd come out to Hollywood in the winter and make pictures, pick up a few extra bucks. He came out again in 27, did a couple more mermaid comedies for educational. What were they? Circus Capers, I think it was, and Plum Dum. He also worked in an FBO feature from 1927, early 28, called The Circus Kid. Actually starred Joey Brown, one of Joey Brown's first silent pictures. Brown, of course, was also a circus performer. And Hanneford works as a clown and does some more of his bareback riding in that. But his next movie job was with the Weiss Brothers, and he made a season of comedies for them in the 28-29 season. And these are probably his most important comedies. Because comedies like Circus Daze here preserve a big chunk of his circus act. But also, again, I think these are the films where you really get to see him working as a comedian. And they were his only, or his last, certainly, starring two-reel series, and his longest running. It's interesting to watch him as a performer. He's obviously a very capable physical comic, good acrobat, and like I said, like a lot of the acrobats like Keaton and Lupino Lane and Chaplin too, short and stocky, but obviously capable of great physical control. He has a touch of the music hall. Again, he was British, so we're seeing, as here, this is a standard old music hall trick. But the other importance of this picture is that we're getting a look at the location, which is in fact the old Selig Zoo, the legendary Selig Zoo, which was one of the earliest movie studios, I think the first private zoo in California, built by Colonel William Selig, who was a motion picture pioneer. He'd formed the Selig Polyscope Company in 1896. He had been a bit of a character in real life. He'd been a circus performer, vaudeville magician, and he got into the movie business very early, was part of the Motion Picture Patents Company, which was, of course, formed by Edison, Selig, George Cliney, the Lubin Company, Vitagraph, and Biograph. I think they were the Patents Trust, who were doing what they could to hold on to the motion picture patent and keep some of the independent producers like Universal and the New York Motion Picture Company from getting into the picture business. Didn't have much luck because they lost their lawsuits against them in the mid-teens. But Selig had been one of the important motion picture producers. Had stars like Hobart Bosworth and Tom Mix. Had built the Selig Zoo. Like I said, Selig come out to California with the Selig Company around, I think, 1908. Built the zoo in 1910. It was in the Lincoln Heights section of East Los Angeles. I think it was on Mission Road, part of, I think, near what's now Eastlake Park. And Selig had built the zoo and the studio next to it so that he could make animal and jungle pictures. And also, the zoo was certainly open to the public. They could also come out and watch movies being made at the studio. This, I think, was certainly extra money. By the 20s, it was primarily working just as a tourist attraction and a rent-a-studio. The Selig Polyscope Company went out of business in 1918 or 19. He was still trying to produce independently in the early 20s, but by this point, he was just renting it out to whoever wanted to use it. Actually, Metro, Louis B. Mayer was renting a big chunk of the studio. I think actually, well, by this time probably not, but a little earlier than this, in the mid-20s. And the Weiss Brothers was not, I don't think, used it too often, but obviously it was a great place to shoot the majority of this film. So you get a nice look at the old Selig Zoo, which continued on for a few years here, but I think closed in the early 30s. And then Selig donated his animals to the city of Los Angeles, where they became the nucleus of the Griffith Park Zoo, which of course is still around. And, but yeah, it's fast. Of course, this area now I think is all condos and houses, which is sort of sad. But I remember, I think it was the History Detectives did a piece on history of the Selig Zoo and what was left, and the original statues, the elephants and lions and other animals that was out in front of the zoo have been preserved and are going to become part of the Griffith Park Zoo now. Well, it looks like we're getting ready to see some of the Poodles Hanneford act coming up here. You know, Hanneford's actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for holding the record for performing the largest number of running leaps onto a horse at full gallop, 26 in fact, and then stepping off and leaping back on again in succession. Not something I'm going to try anytime soon, and I suggest kids don't do it at home, but nevertheless, that's a pretty amazing stunt. And I said, Hanneford was, like I said, just famous for horse training. He trained not only horses for himself, but for other circuses, and continued to do that throughout his life, and continued performing. We're going to get him into the into drag here, something you didn't think you were going to see, Poodles Hanneford in drag. But this drag bareback riding routine that we're going to see, a lot of falls, is a part of his act that he did in the circus for years. He also had a clown makeup, which has been preserved in the Clown Hall of Fame. And I think he was indoctrinated into the Circus Hall of Fame in the 1970s. And off he goes here. I think the fellow in the top hat is actually another Hanneford. I'm not sure which one, a Hanneford brother, but he's obviously very used to doing this act. It's interesting because there is a little bit of movie fudging. Sometimes Poodles is on a wire, but believe it or not, he's not here. This is actually part of the act that he was used to performing, daily in the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. He said you would have to have those are strong horses. Obviously strong enough to let a person hang off their neck like that while they're running. You'll notice that this print, or this transfer of the print, the quality changes a little bit from time to time. This was actually one of the films that we had to utilize not only original 35mm nitrate materials, but also had to utilize a 16mm print. The original 35 nitrate material had been cut up into not only, I think, use for the Chucklehead TV series that the Weiss Brothers put out in the 60s, but also it had been cut down for use in 16mm home prints, because the Weiss Brothers released a number of these comedies to the home market, 16 and 8mm, in the late 40s, and they had both complete prints and short excerpts. So what you're seeing here is a composite of both 35mm nitrate materials and a 16mm original from my collection. I'm happy to say I actually donated that for use in this. It enabled us to put together a complete print of the picture. Up now, we're seeing Poodles on a wire. It's interesting because this is being shot. You see from time to time, especially in circus comedies, a training, like a training circle, which will have somebody on a wire on basically a circular crane that turns with them as they go around the circle. And this is obviously what they're utilizing here, not only to have Poodles on the wire, but also enabling the camera to turn 360 degrees to follow it. And a couple of films you see this in. There's a Hal Roach, Snub Pollard, Paul Parrott comedy called Join the Circus, where they do that. And again, you have that where they're following them going round and round. And Charlie Chase comedy called Sting of Stings, too, from 1927, where they utilize that. Now, but this, again, no wire here. This was a part of the circus act where he's standing on the head of another person as they go around. That is not safe. Again, kids, do not, please try that at home. That's for all you children and stupid people who think, oh, gee, that's easy. I'm going to go get a horse and try that. But no, not advised. Uh-oh. We're coming down to the end here. It looks like Edwin's attacking Betty. So I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, Poodles Hanneford, again, may not have been the greatest comedies, and maybe with a better comedy director than Les Goodwin's, there might have been some even more invention. But again, just to see Hanneford doing his act is a great opportunity, and again, certainly a reason why he should be remembered not only as the legendary circus clown that he was, but as certainly a good, if not great, silent film comedian. And hope you enjoyed it.